There are people around the world who will probably tell you stories about Brooklyn, and because they didn't like coming here, and they heard all sorts of bad stories. And 20 years ago, Brooklyn was a tough town.
Even back in the 70s and 80s, when I was at Borough Hall, there wasn't as much going on. So, there was no development. People worried about whether, Brooklyn could survive.
I recall my barbershop, on Myrtle Avenue, and I used to drive to Myrtle Avenue, get out of my car, and have to run through the drug dealers and the streetwalkers, and then get my hair cut, and then run back.
There was no significant economic development projects in the borough. If anything, businesses had already left us, and other businesses were following. Our retail sections were weak, and there was a lack of hope.
Well, it was an interesting time. The Metrotech project, as it was starting to take shape, was a project that everybody was looking at to revitalize downtown Brooklyn.
Yes, we started in Brooklyn around 1988. Obviously, there was hadn't been much development in Brooklyn at all. 20, 30 years before that. So we were the first major project to really come along. And obviously, it was a lot of concern about community benefits and jobs and programs like that. And it was not particularly organized. And I think there were many different individual splinter groups all vying for worthy causes, but no real organization to it.
There was a time in Brooklyn where you would have these coalitions and different organizations just showing up at your doorstep without any kind of plan at all.
It all changed, and we then started to look at how we could work together, to try to produce a win-win. And one of the first things we did, was to set up a mission, twofold mission. One, to maximize on the opportunities for minorities, women, and local residents in Brooklyn, both in terms of contracting and employment. And the second was to help facilitate the building of these major construction projects because of the economic benefit they provide for the people of Brooklyn.
I realized as soon as I walked in that meeting that this was not the meeting I was anticipating. There was a lot of local people there that had huge expectations, and they were looking at me, quite frankly, as the individual who was either going to facilitate those needs or be an obstacle. To add a little fuel to this fire, right around the time that we were having this meeting, the Spike Lee movie came out about Do the Right Thing, and there was just a lot of tension about getting work on the Metrotech project that the folks at that meeting really were committed. They were anticipating participating, and it was my job to make sure that we can satisfy everyone's requirement.
When we had the meeting, Peter told me I would have to convince him that I had the capabilities to do such a job. And after we had a 2-hour conversation almost, Peter later called me back and let me know that if I was still interested, they would be willing to facilitate my working on the project.
It's a commitment. It's a commitment to make sure that the economic benefits that are promised by public projects actually do get received by the people who are living in the community.
The DBAOC, being led by business people, will never approach a developer and ask them to do something that doesn't make good business sense.
The DBAOC is an organization which has survived itself on a meager budget. I think it's an organization that should be institutionalized. We're in a development boom in Brooklyn. When you look 5 or 10 years down the road, there's more that's going to happen.
There is still a significant misperception that big development jobs cannot be done with minority contractors and local hiring. And that misperception is clearly not true. And groups like the DBAOC have worked in partnership with the private sector to demonstrate that projects can happen, they can get done well, and they can be fully inclusive of the community and really kind of work to grow smaller businesses as the projects advance.
I think that, with the volume of work that's going to happen in Brooklyn in the next 10 to 15 years, it is a huge undertaking. And I don't think that there are enough qualified contractors on the MBWB side, nor just standard companies out here that's going to be able to do all this work. There are a lot of talented people out here, and I think we just need to keep the pressure on and give them, an opportunity.
Public sector has made a very significant investment in downtown Brooklyn. It's rezoned the entire area. It's committed close to $300 million in capital monies to build new parks and redo the streetscape and an infrastructure network down here. On the private side, there's close to $9 billion worth of private investment. This is an area of, very significant growth.
They couldn't be luckier when they hire Brooklyn residents. They're going to have a lot of work here to do. There's going to be plenty of work over, just looking ahead over the next 10, 15, 20 years. There is not an inkling that things are going to slow up, that's for sure. And they have to understand that they are very fortunate that Brooklyn is home to the largest African American and Caribbean American population in America, and one of the largest Latino populations in America, as well as being a majority, and the only true majority in Brooklyn are women. And that's true, guys. They're the majority. So we got to respect them, and we got to respect our African and Caribbean American community. The better they do, the more employees of color that they hire and promote and manage, the better the future of Brooklyn and New York City is. That's the bottom line. Nobody works harder than Brooklyn residents. Nobody.